They dismissed my career without a second thought, never asking about the deals I'd closed or the properties I managed. To them, I was a lucky nobody who'd somehow snagged their daughter. The real humiliation, though, came during family gatherings, holidays, birthdays, barbecues, where their disdain took on a ritualistic quality that chipped away at my pride. Every event followed the same degrading routine. I'd pull into their circular driveway in my pickup truck, a vehicle they never failed to eye with faint disapproval. I'd bring an expensive bottle of wine or whiskey as a peace offering, hoping it might earn me a shred of respect. I'd walk up to the front entrance, like any guest would, only to be met by Sarah at the door. Her eyes would carry that familiar apologetic look, and she'd whisper, "Kitchen entrance today. You've been working all day and guests are using the front door. You understand, right?" Like a fool, I'd nod and trudge around to the side of the house, past their imported stone fountains and manicured gardens, to enter through the service door like I was delivering groceries. Inside, I'd be relegated to the kitchen, perched on a bar stool at their granite island, eating off paper plates, while they dined on fine china under antique chandeliers in the formal dining room. The catering staff would buzz around me, preparing trays of hors d'oeuvre, while I listened to the sounds of the real party drifting in from the next room. Polite laughter, the clink of crystal glasses, conversations about yacht clubs and stock portfolios. I'd overhear Sarah's relatives making jokes about the blue-collar husband who'd gotten lucky enough to marry into their family. Sarah's father, Robert, had mastered the art of condescension without crossing into outright rudeness. He'd pat my shoulder and say things like, "Keep working hard," "sport," or ask if I needed help understanding the stock market. Discussions happening in the dining room. His tone was always just polite enough to avoid confrontation, but sharp enough to cut. Sarah's mother, Victoria, was worse. She'd flash a saccharine smile and suggest I might be more comfortable watching football in the den rather than joining their adult conversations about politics and business. Each word was a calculated reminder that I wasn't one of them. The worst part wasn't their snobbery, it was Sarah's silence. She'd shrug off their behavior with a casual, "That's just how they are," or "Don't let them get to you." She never once stood up for me, never questioned why her husband had to sneak in through the back door or eat alone in the kitchen. Over time, I started to wonder if she was embarrassed by me, too. Did she buy into her family's narrative that I was beneath them? Did she see me as the lucky guy who'd married up just like they did? The doubts gnawed at me, but I kept them buried, telling myself I could endure it for her sake. What I didn't tell her, what none of them knew, was the truth about my work. While they were busy playing aristocrats and looking down on my simple real estate job, I was quietly building an empire. My company, Sterling Holdings, manages a portfolio of 43 properties across 3 states, office buildings, luxury apartment complexes, retail spaces. I've got contracts with city governments, relationships with major developers, and a business worth more than the Blackwell's entire extended family could imagine. I don't flaunt it. I don't need to. My success is in the numbers, the deals, the handshakes that move entire city blocks. 3 years ago, I bought the Blackwells' colonial mansion from the bank when they were 6 months behind on mortgage payments. Robert had made a series of disastrous investments and they were facing foreclosure. The bank was ready to auction off their precious home when I stepped in and purchased it outright. Sarah begged me to save her childhood home, so I let them stay as tenants, charging below-market rent out of respect for her. They had no idea their landlord was the same man they made eat Thanksgiving dinner in the kitchen. For years, I kept that secret, letting them believe their carefully curated world was still intact. Last Thanksgiving, everything unraveled. I arrived at the Blackwell's mansion with a bottle of aged scotch, the kind that costs more than most people's monthly grocery bill. Sarah met me at the front door, wearing a cream-colored dress that matched her mother's taste for expensive, neutral fabrics. "Guests are using the front entrance," she said, avoiding my eyes. "You've been working all day. You understand the situation, right?" That familiar knot of anger and resignation twisted in my stomach. But I nodded and handed her the scotch. Our fingers brushed for a moment before she turned away. I walked around to the kitchen entrance, my boots crunching on the gravel driveway. They'd had installed, the previous summer, a driveway I'd technically paid for through property maintenance expenses. I passed their landscaped gardens, their imported furniture, all the trappings of their so-called refined taste. The kitchen was alive with activity, caterers in black uniforms, arranging appetizer trays, a massive turkey roasting in their commercial-grade oven. I took my usual spot at the island, unbuttoned my flannel shirt at the collar, and poured myself a drink from the scotch I'd brought. The sounds of the dinner party drifted in, polite laughter, the clink of wine glasses, talk of vacation homes and private schools. Robert was telling a story about his golf game, while Victoria discussed her latest charity gala. None of them acknowledged me, though guests passing through the kitchen saw me sitting there like part of the help. Victoria swept in, her pearls gleaming, her cashmere cardigan perfectly pressed. She paused when she saw me, her eyebrows lifting slightly. "Oh," she said, her smile as cold as ever. "I didn't realize you'd chosen kitchen duty tonight." She gestured toward the dining room, where 12 guests sat around a mahogany table under sparkling chandeliers, silk napkins folded into intricate shapes. "We have plenty of room at the table," she added, her tone making it clear there was no room for me. I kept my face neutral and took a sip of scotch. "Just making sure everything runs smoothly," I said, my voice steady. Showing emotion only gave them ammunition, and I'd learned that lesson well. Victoria's smile tightened. "Well, Frank will handle the serving," she said, using the name Robert called me when he thought no one important was listening. She clicked away on her designer heels, leaving me with the caterers, who treated me with more respect than my own in-laws. I sat there, picking at a turkey sandwich a caterer had made, staring at my reflection in the stainless steel backsplash. Dark eyes, strong jawline, the face of a man who'd built everything from nothing. They saw a working-class husband who'd gotten lucky. I saw someone who'd earned every ounce of respect he deserved, even if they were too blind to see it. The dining room buzzed with their shallow chatter, weather, gossip, complaints about their golf club's new policies. They laughed at inside jokes and shared stories about people I'd never meet. For years, I'd listened to them, dismiss my work as playing with buildings, while they coasted on inherited wealth and called it success. I was halfway through my sandwich when the front door opened with a force that silenced the house. A deep, commanding voice boomed through the rooms. "That better be Victoria's famous stuffing I'm smelling, because I drove 2 hours for this meal." I didn't need to look up to know it was Marcus Wellington, one of the most powerful commercial developers on the East Coast and my biggest client. His voice carried the weight of someone who closed billion-dollar deals and had city mayors on speed dial. What was he doing here? Marcus strode into the kitchen, his silver hair perfectly styled, his navy suit tailored to perfection. He had a presence that demanded attention, the kind of authority that comes from years of shaping skylines. When he saw me at the island, his face lit up with genuine warmth. "Hey there, boss," he said, loud enough for the entire house to hear. The word boss hit like a thunderclap, echoing into the dining room. The house fell silent, no laughter, no clinking glasses, not even the hum of the oven. Sarah stood in the doorway, her wine glass trembling, her face pale. Robert was frozen behind her, napkin clutched in his fist, mouth agape. I stood slowly, extending my hand to Marcus, keeping my voice calm. "Good to see you, Marcus. Didn't expect to run into you here tonight." His grin widened as he clasped my hand, giving me a shoulder clap reserved for those he respected. "Wouldn't miss Victoria's Thanksgiving for anything," he said, oblivious to the tension. "Listen, I can't thank you enough for that Burlington project. Sterling Holdings made the whole deal possible." Every eye in the house turned toward us. Sarah's sister appeared in the doorway, her wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. Uncle Howard, who'd once called me a guy who got lucky with Sarah, looked like he'd seen a ghost. Marcus kept talking, his voice carrying into the dining room. "The City Planning Commission was giving me hell about those zoning variances, but your connections smoothed everything over. And don't get me started on the permit process. What should have taken 6 months, you got done in 3 weeks." He leaned against the counter, completely at ease, unaware he was dismantling their world with every word. "I've been telling everyone in the industry, if you want real estate done right in this state, you call Sterling Holdings. This guy knows every commissioner, every inspector, every legal loophole worth knowing." The silence was deafening. I could hear the antique clock ticking in the hallway. Victoria gripped a dining chair, her knuckles white. Robert made a strangled sound that died in his throat. Marcus glanced at him, puzzled. "Didn't realize the house was so quiet tonight," he said, gesturing at the stunned faces. "Usually you folks keep things pretty lively during the holidays." Robert's voice cracked as he spoke. "We didn't realize you two were so well acquainted." Marcus laughed.
Acquainted?
"Hell, I wouldn't have made half my deals this year without Sterling Holdings backing me up. Your son-in-law runs one of the most successful property management companies in the region. I trust him with deals worth tens of millions." The word millions hung in the air. I watched the Blackwells realize they'd been wrong about me. Completely, devastatingly wrong. Marcus turned back to me, his tone conspiratorial. "I've got a couple new projects coming up that might interest you. That waterfront development we discussed, the investors are ready to move forward. But they want Sterling Holdings handling the property management side," he scrolled through his phone, likely pulling up project details. "We're talking a 50-unit luxury complex, plus retail space on the ground floor. The kind of project that could define a city's downtown for the next 20 years. I nodded, aware that everyone was listening like it was a soap opera. "Send me the details and I'll review the numbers," I said, my voice steady despite the satisfaction burning in my chest. Marcus clapped me on the back. "You're the reason I stay ahead of schedule and under budget. Even my competitors ask who handles my properties. I tell them, if you want the best in the business, you call Sterling Holdings." Sarah's voice broke the silence, barely a whisper. "You own a company?" I met her eyes, letting the silence stretch. "Several," I said quietly. Victoria's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the kitchen floor. Red wine spreading like blood. She stared at the mess, then at me, her expression a mix of shock and fear. Marcus finally sensed the tension. "Listen, I should probably get back to my family," he said, curious but diplomatic. "But seriously, thank you for everything this year. Sterling Holdings has been a game-changer for my business." He left, and the kitchen remained frozen. Robert stood in the doorway, his face pale. Victoria's hands shook as she cleaned up the broken glass, her pearls clicking nervously. Whispers started in the dining room, my company name, questions about my work. Their carefully curated social order was crumbling. Robert finally spoke, his voice thin. "You own buildings?" I took a sip of scotch and met his gaze. 43 properties across 3 states. Office buildings, apartment complexes, retail spaces. Sterling Holdings manages about $200 million in commercial real estate. The number hit him like a blow. He stepped back, steadying himself against the door frame. Victoria made a small sound, part sob, part gasp. Sarah stared at me like she'd never seen me before, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. In that moment, I realized she'd never really known me. She'd bought into her family's narrative, never bothering to ask what I did. I stood, straightening my flannel shirt, feeling taller than I had in years. "I need to get going," I said calmly. "Early meeting tomorrow with the, planning commission about a new development. Downtown." I walked toward the kitchen door, then paused. "By the way, the rent check is due on the 1st of the month, same as always." Confusion crossed their faces. Robert's brow furrowed. "Rent check?" I smiled coldly. "For the house, Robert. Your lease payment to Sterling Holdings. 3 years running now, though we've never met in person during a business transaction." The truth hit like a tsunami. Victoria grabbed the counter to steady herself. Robert's face turned gray. Sarah's eyes widened with horror. "You're our landlord," she whispered. "Have been since you were 6 months behind on your mortgage," I confirmed. "The bank was ready to foreclose when I bought the property." "You're welcome, by the way." I walked out through the front door, the cold night air cleansing. Behind me, raised voices erupted, confusion, anger, panic. I didn't look back. The weeks that followed were chaotic. The Blackwells didn't reflect or apologize. They went on the offensive. Anonymous calls to city inspectors reported fake violations at my properties, fire code issues, safety problems, all fiction. Fake online reviews from accounts with no history called me a slumlord. Someone tipped off my insurance company about my business practices. Anonymous complaints to the housing board alleged discrimination in my rental policies. It was amateurish but coordinated, and I knew Robert was behind it. He thought he could pressure me, maybe force me to sell the house at a discount. He'd underestimated me. In my business, documentation is everything. I had maintenance logs, inspection reports, contractor invoices, and tenant testimonials going back years. But I wasn't content to just defend myself. I hired a private investigator to trace the complaints. Within a week, he linked them to a low-rent PR firm Robert had hired. They'd been sloppy, leaving digital fingerprints everywhere. I decided to go nuclear. I took out a full-page ad in the regional business journal, titled "When Family Becomes a Liability, a Case Study in Professional Sabotage." No fancy graphics, just the truth. Screenshots of fake reviews, phone logs, email chains proving their campaign. I didn't name Robert or Victoria, but the local business community could connect the dots. The fallout was swift. Robert's development projects faced delays. Permits got lost. Inspectors grew thorough. Investors pulled out citing reputational concerns. Victoria's charity work dried up. Her society friends suddenly had scheduling conflicts. Their country club membership came under review. Sarah called daily, her voicemails shifting from anger to desperation. "You're destroying my family," she sobbed in one. "This isn't who you are. We can fix this if we talk." But I was done talking, done pretending their approval mattered. A month later, Robert made a final play. He invited me to a family dinner to clear the air, just the four of us. He promised no guests. I agreed, curious about his angle. When I arrived at my house, their former mansion, the dining room, table was set for four with their finest china. Robert greeted me at the front door with a rehearsed handshake, his smile strained. The dinner was painful. Overcooked chicken, wilted vegetables, forced conversation. After the plates were cleared, Robert made his pitch. "We've been working on a new development concept," he said, sliding a manila folder across the table. It contained architectural renderings and shoddy financial projections for a mixed-use project downtown. We'd need a partner with experience and capital, someone who understands the local market. It was a desperate attempt to latch onto my success. I flipped through the folder, noting the laughable projections. "Let me understand this," I said, meeting his eyes. "You want me to risk my company's reputation on a project you threw together after months of trying to destroy my business with fake complaints?" Robert's face reddened. "That was a misunderstanding," he stammered. "Family dynamics, you know how it is. This is our chance to work together as a family." I stood, the chair scraping the hardwood. "Family," I repeated. "Funny how I became family when you found out I owned your house." Sarah's eyes glistened with tears. "Please, we can start over. Dad didn't mean for things to go so far." I looked at her, seeing someone who'd let her family define me without ever asking who I was. "No," I said, "we can't start over. Because this started the first time you made me use the kitchen door. This started every time they called me lucky for marrying you. And you said nothing." I left the folder and walked out through the front door, shedding years of humiliation. The divorce was clean. No shared assets, no alimony. Everything I'd built predated our marriage. Sarah signed without a fight, perhaps realizing she'd married a stranger she'd never tried to know. 6 months later, I terminated their lease with a standard 30-day notice, citing plans to renovate the property. They scrambled to find a new place, ending up in a modest townhouse, a far cry from their colonial mansion. Robert's development company folded and he took a job working for someone else. Victoria started shopping at regular grocery stores. Her days of gourmet markets over. The mansion sits empty now as I decide its future. Maybe luxury apartments. Maybe a sale to a family who'll appreciate it. But I won't let people live there, who think some belong at the front door and others in the kitchen. I drive by their townhouse sometimes, not to gloat but to remind myself what happens when people mistake kindness for weakness. The Blackwells taught me that some will never see your worth, no matter your achievements. But they also taught me that building something undeniable gives you the power to walk away. I'm with someone new now, a woman who knew what I did before she knew my last name. She's never asked me to use a back door or apologize for my work clothes. When I told her this story, she called the Blackwells idiots for not seeing what they had. Marcus still sends me deals bigger than ever. My company grows, and I've never had to justify my place at the table. I built the table myself, and I choose who sits at it. The best revenge isn't settling scores, it's building a life so fulfilling that their opinions become irrelevant. I spent years chasing their respect when I should have been building something they could never take away. Now, when I host holidays, everyone comes through the front door.